He can't be here either.
Is Heidi coming? Or is she not here this time?
She didn't say she wasn't coming. And Brock isn't here.
Right.
So the chair and vice chair aren't here.
And it's a rather distracting day, maybe, you know.
What? Is there something going on?
I know.
Some of them might still be hiding under their pillow.
I didn't know anything was going on today. I
I
hadn't known.
know, right?
But
It would have
maybe
been fun
if
just to
we-
like just turn off the TV and all radios for the last 48 hours and just, you know, throw the dice and wake up tomorrow.
That's what I said last night. It didn't work.
I feel your pain. I feel it.
Well, I guess we can get started anyway and start reviewing some stuff. I sent you all the
Right.
center proposal.
Mhm.
I asked Mike Ward is the gentleman. He couldn't be here tonight. He had I think he had some sort of town meeting or something, but it was a conflict. I wanted to kind of talk to the board, but I mean, his proposal is pretty self-explanatory. You know, they've done this for a few different communities. I mean, I wanted to just talk about it because, you know, they write a memo that basically lays out, you know, some inconsistencies in the current charter, which we're doing now anyway. But also, you know, they talk about reviewing the charter and comparing it to other municipalities and doing some best practices. I thought that was probably the most interesting part to me was, you know, just kind of comparing Dartmouth's charter to some other municipalities that they've done to see what, you know, what works. You know, we've been through it. Anthony and I have had some discussions about our charter, and it's, you know, it's good. It's just dated. We need some updating, and, you know, we're going back and forth. We're finding a lot of stuff, but we're, you know, we also aren't comparing it to some other charters that are out there, which I think the Collins Center might be good at. You know, their fee is $7,500. We really want to, you know, I think we can find the funding for that to get that done. But, you know, it's up to the committee here to think if it's worthwhile or if it's, and I can certainly have Mike Ward come in to our next meeting and kind of walk us through it, how they would do it in more detail. So we don't have to make any decisions tonight, but
I think that's a good plan, Sean, not to like interrupt you there, but just to have, you know, a third party and then, you know, before, since Heidi, especially and Brock aren't here, to have that kind of mini presentation would be, you know, instructive.
yeah. I also asked another consultant, but he never got back to me. But if I hear from them too, I can see if they'll put something
Okay.
together. We can compare their two proposals. So
Right.
It's already a strike against them, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I shouldn't have said that, right?
if you're not interested in making money, then, you know.
That's true. That's true. So everyone's busy. But okay, let me see. When's our next meeting? The 18th. All right. So I'll see if he can come in on the 18th. Let's see, what else do I have on here? So that's the Collins Center, and then review of Article 1. You know, I wanted to bring up with the committee, though, we can certainly go through the charter, but I didn't know with everyone not here, but this may be something to think about for the next meeting. Would it be better to kind of have a discussion about, now that everyone's read the charter, say, you know, do we want to look at some big picture things that we think would be changes that are significant that we would like to see or not see, and then kind of talk about major changes, and then kind of see if the committee agrees on some larger changes, and then talk about some smaller changes after that. So kind of big picture, like what, you know, what do we envision? Maybe it's not big changes, maybe it's just some tweaking, maybe everyone feels differently, but it'd be good to get a feel for the group, having gone through the charter individually, to say, yeah, you know what, I think we could make some large scale changes that would be beneficial, or you know what, so others may think with some tweaking, it might be better. So I don't know, that's for you all to kind of chew on, but that might be a good way to get us started, and you know, so that we're all on the same page. Like, yeah, okay, the majority agree big changes are needed, or the majority agree with some tweaking, we can get through it, and some updating that might have more success with town meeting. So anyone have any thoughts on that? Yep, Brian?
I was just going to say that I think if we go through the redlined charter, a lot of this, and I think most of the red line that I've seen, at least in the first article, is pretty straightforward in terms of capitalization, et cetera. That we're going to run, if we go through that, we're going to get through it rather quickly. And we agreed in the last meeting we should do that. And I think also if we do it that way, what you're suggesting is going to come up as we go to each article in terms of people saying, well, think about this that might need to be changed or whatever. So at least failing these consultants doing it another way, that would take us through the charter and would naturally allow us to talk about things that people think might need to be changed.
Yeah, I mean, the consultant is going to ask, what the committee would like to see for, where the committee sees the charter going. So they can certainly get us there and show us some examples and some, like I said, best practices. But if this committee says we need more elected boards and more decentralized government, then they'll work towards that goal, or vice versa. So
I guess I don't think, I mean, I don't know. I don't like those 2 points that you just brought up. I don't have a feeling one way or the other because I really don't know.
no.
Oh, you do.
As far
Oh,
as
well.
I think he has an opinion.
the redlining on the wording, I mean, that's something I think Anthony should go through, and we should take a look at what he wants. And I mean, to be honest with you, cleaning up the document with the proper verbiage and spelling and whatnot is tantamount, because we should have as almost a pristine document to govern by, because if what we govern by is sloppy looking, then that just speaks volumes about us. The only thing that really is sticking in my mind right now is the numbers of town meeting members. I think right now it's 39 per.
It's 390, I thought total, isn't it?
390 total, yes.
Yeah.
So it's a
All right. So it's a little bit more. It's only nine precincts. So
Right.
So 390 divided by 9, that's 43 and a third per.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's been a lot of days where we're at town meeting waiting for the quorum to show up.
Right. And
And
plus
we
the
can
fact
barely
that
get a
if you look
quorum
at
half
the
the-
membership numbers over a period of time, you see the same people not showing up.
Right. I'm with you on that one, Sean. I mean, my husband got in on one vote and really didn't, I mean, because I signed him, years ago, and again, it happened again, and he was really willing to kind of step back. I mean, that's, I'm precinct 5. I feel like we should have people who really want, I mean, I'm not selling out my husband, but I really do feel like we should have people who want to be there, in a smaller, it would be more productive, I think, if we had, certainly, I think 7 and 9, those are more competitive, but it seems to me that, some of, 5 is certainly not, I can't speak to others, but I'm with you, Sean. That's something I've,
Nine has always been competitive. 9 has always had more than the number of people, the number of positions opening. Whether if it was 13 that was on the ballot, generally there was 15 or 16 that always happened. 1, 2, generally at least in the last 5 to 6 years haven't even had half the number.
5, I can say again, like you can
Yeah.
you write yourself in, and you're, maybe get one other person, and not even
And
that.
mostly
Like,
those were just recents. And of course, precinct 3 is a total wash.
yeah,
Is
right.
that-
That's just the college, and you get nobody from there. So that's just a given that, you're gonna have.
I have a
39
question. What's the benefit of having less town meeting members?
You get a quorum, you don't have to worry about a quorum. We always have to worry about whether a majority will even show up
Right.
at town meeting. Oftentimes it's been 20 after the hour and we're still waiting for enough people.
Well,
to
is
show
it
up.
a matter of waiting, or is it a matter of you can't have the town meeting?
We
I
can't
know-
have
I
the
know you
town
have to have a
meeting.
quorum.
If they don't show up, you can't have the town
Yeah.
I
meeting.
know that, but I mean, how many times has it actually happened where you couldn't have a town meeting because you didn't have a quorum?
Been close sometimes.
Been-
And
Well,
then
close-
people leave and then people leave. And if somebody asks for a quorum count, we're in trouble.
Well,
And
I mean,
if
if
But
somebody
somebody has
I
to wait
want-
an
I
hour
would
halfway
like to
through the
know-
voting, yeah.
is that the major reason?
Well, no, I think if you look at it, so it's an elected position. There's a
Mhm.
lot of vacancies right now. So if you pare down the number of town meeting representatives and then make it a more competitive process to be elected, then the people that are elected are there and they're more engaged, then they pay more attention. Now, a lot of times town meeting reps, they don't know what's on the warrant until they get to town meeting.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
just,
Right. So
again, personal experience, people I know who are on it or have been on it, and all the seriousness of it, I think, has diminished because it's so incredibly easy to get on. And and to your point, like Brian, I can see how you would want to make it expansive, the more people, more voices, and, kind of seemingly more democratic. But you also want people to be they're supposed to be representative. So I would think that you'd want them to really, really know, why they're there and be committed to, as Sean said, the process and knowing the material and have studied it. Because, they want to have that, you want to have them have accountability. That would be my thinking.
That wasn't my point. Somebody was saying that it's inconvenient because sometimes you can't get a quorum. I mean,
Okay.
I have no opinion on it one way or the other because it's the first time I've heard it.
Well, here's the other thing is if you want to have 390, you might as well just make it an open town meeting. If you're talking about making it democratic, the true democracy is anybody who wants to come can come. It's representative. It's more of a
Right.
republic than a democracy.
I mean, it has happened in the past. I've been a town meeting member for 44 years. And I believe I can count on one hand that we haven't had a quorum. And generally, it was mostly the time when the meeting was being held in January, February, or March. We never really, there weren't too many town meetings in the fall. The annual has always been held. Sometimes the annual, we had to wait till 9:30, 9:45 to get a quorum. And then when that was happening, people were talking about, maybe we should move town meeting to a Saturday so that people who work would be able to get there. And there has been quorum counts, plenty. I've done it. And I can tell you exactly when I did it. There was a time when the town was looking to go to 2-acre zoning. And it was a big hullabaloo. And the verbiage for the 2-acre zoning passed. And I noticed people getting up and leaving. So I called a quorum and it killed all the debate on that. And it had to be brought back. That 2-acre zoning didn't come back for another few years. But I think it becomes more responsible for town meeting members to show up and do their due diligence. When you have somebody who shows up to one meeting in 3 years, and you've had 6, 7 meetings and they only show up one, they're not serving the public well. They're not serving the town at all. There are people that show up to every single meeting. There are people that show up to 75% of the meetings, half the meetings, but there are more people who show up to less than half the meetings at all the time. So you either do it two ways. You keep the number and you have a meeting attendance requirement that they must meet, or they get removed from the rolls, or you lower the number of town meeting members. Now, I'm not saying to what number, maybe 30 instead of 39 to 43. Maybe that'll kind of make it a little bit easier.
What would happen if you did 20, Sean?
What's
What if
that?
you did 20 instead of 39? You're talking about per precinct, right?
Yeah. So, but each one is for a 3-year term, so you're electing 10 people per year, per
Yeah,
precinct.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So I have well, here's a case where I think that consultant might be able to help us, because I know for a fact that some other towns have cut the number of town meeting members. And perhaps somebody could tell us whether that has done anything to improve attendance or whatever other benefits there might be associated with it.
Anthony, do you know how how the town sets the number of town meeting representatives, how that's determined?
They did it by the charter. Do I know how they originally did it? No. Maybe
Well,
Steve.
how did they come up with the 390? I have no idea. Like, I'm just curious, like, and then if we wanted to decrease it, what's the methodology to determining what?
It's in the charter. Let me look at the charter.
So while he's looking, I have a question. I'm not a town meeting member and I'm new to these things. Like, as a planning board member, I was interested in how do you communicate with town meeting members to get your ideas across or to react to somebody else's ideas. And I went to the clerk's office to get a list of town meeting members, which I had no problem getting, but they would have a list and then they would have a street address, which is more or less useless in this day and age, unless you're going to send parchment and quill pen stuff around by US mail. About a third of them had email addresses and virtually none of them, but a handful had telephone numbers.
Yeah.
Now, if the idea is that they're going to represent the people of their precinct, it would seem to me that it would make sense to A, reduce the number a bit because you're going to get a much more efficient meeting. But B, one of the most fundamental requirements is that people who are elected as a town meeting member got to be able to tell their constituents how the hell to get hold of them easily. At least an email address,
Yeah, I mean,
and
there was an
preferably
email-
both email and phone.
There
But
was
that,
an
I mean, to me, that's an issue of somebody saying when you're elected, you have to give your phone number to the town and or your email address.
We've done
I
that.
think-
We capture their cell phone and email now, and I think we have a larger list than that, Steve. But
Well, I'll be in to look for it because I got mine right after I got elected to the planning board a year and a half ago. And I've been saying to myself, I should go in. They were telling me they were working on getting a better list and I'm going to go in and try to get it. But
yeah, it's pretty much complete now. We updated it for the last remote meeting because we wanted to contact all of them and provide them with instructions for Zoom. And then it's been updated even more for this past remote town meeting. So it's pretty complete
well,
now.
that would be good. And also I'm sensitive to people's privacy with respect to their phone numbers. And it's possible for people to have 2 or 3 email addresses that do certain things. And so I could compromise if somebody would guarantee they had their email address that they look at. And the phone number thing is, maybe yes, maybe no. But I think there should be if you're going to have a town meeting member, whatever the size is, they've got to be responsive to their constituents and easy to get hold of. And if you had that, then I think it wouldn't be a problem to have fewer and the meetings would be more productive and you'd have an easier quorum and all that stuff.
And the other thing
Sean-
too is, when I was younger and more naive in the ways of politics, I actually held a pre-town meeting for my precinct at the time, which was precinct 5. And I was there by myself. I did it the next year. I had one other person. And other than that, so, I mean,
What did you have for refreshments?
this was at the old, I held it at the old town meeting in the old town hall, which is
Right.
where DCTV is. I think one of the things that we fight as people who volunteer and get elected in this town is getting people interested in local government.
Right.
They will do their thing on social media. They will bitch and hum. They will complain about the orange bags. They will complain about the snowplows, knocking down their mailboxes. They'll complain about, seeing a DPW driver, sitting on the side of the road and, or a cop sitting on the side of the road. But yet you try to get them involved and they don't have the time. They'd rather just, sit behind a keyboard and bitch,
Sean, and
So,
actually,
Sean, section 2.2 says the representative town meeting membership shall consist of 390 members, who all shall be registered voters of the town and shall be apportioned in the precincts on the basis of population, with each precinct having as near as possible the same number of representative town meeting members. So I don't know how it's written in stone, 390. I don't know how they came up to it. Steve, maybe you could. Do you have any memory going that far back? I know it was 20
I
years
don't
ago.
remember. I don't remember how we came to that number. And I don't remember any great discussion between 390, 400, or any lesser number. I do ask for clarification, is the quorum based on the number 390 or the number of seats that have been filled?
The number of seats that are filled.
So, yeah.
Okay,
So
that's
that was-
even more
And
significant.
that's 304.
Okay. That's really significant then, if we can't get a quorum from a much lesser number.
Right, right.
Sean, I have and I'm sorry, because I know you guys can't see me, but for some reason my camera. But a quick question, when you did the last 2 Zoom calls, what kind of numbers did you have? Because I mean, I've heard, from parents, going out at night and everything, and I have to imagine that I'm curious if you had higher numbers, I guess.
We did. So the last meeting, I think we had around 255 is what I saw. And then the
Okay.
meeting before that in the spring was over 200. And I want to say it was like 225.
And what's your typical number that you think that you would have?
In person, it's that or less.
Yeah.
And like, you know,
Usually what?
180,
John,
190.
you would know better than me, but
And what's the
180,
quorum?
190, somewhere around there. I mean, you got to understand the Zoom meetings a lot different because you're not
Right.
out of your house, driving to a location.
Well, no, exactly.
And plus the fact that it was held on a Saturday morning
Right.
and a night for a shorter meeting. So
And what do you think, Sean?
those 2 things, because usually the annual meeting starts at 9 o'clock on a
Oh, I
Tuesday
know.
morning.
But I mean, it was,
Question I asked, if you remove somebody from town meeting representative seat for lack of attendance, is that akin to a recall or is it a simplified process?
Yeah, that bothers me. If they're elected, they're elected. I don't know how we would do that. I'd have to look at that.
I don't.
Well,
just-
this is again why I think we should maybe have these consultants if these kind of issues are going to come up,
Well, I
because we
think-
all have we all have anecdotes, but we really don't know. Like, we don't know why it's 390.
Oh, I can
Yeah,
tell
but the consultant's not gonna know why it's 390. The
Right. I
I
original,
know that. I said questions like that.
well, 390 was when we had 10 precincts.
okay.
And it became, the percentage happened at the 10 precincts and everybody said 39 per precinct. Each 3-year term would be 13 people and staggered three years. So it's 13, everybody. So you're getting 1/3 voting on year one, the second third, year 2, the third in year 3, and then you start all over again. So that's what it was. It developed because of 10 precincts. We only now have 9.
Hmm.
So
here's the thing is if we only have 300 people, why wouldn't we start with that as a quorum number? Why would we want to stay at 390 when we know we can't fill 90? At a minimum, we should reduce it to the number that we have
Yeah.
currently.
That's smart.
Well,
Or some number that's
divisible
divisible by 9.
You have to find out, in my opinion, how are we trying to fill these seats? I mean, are we all happy with the methodology that we use to fill the seats?
It's an elected
Yeah.
position.
yeah, it's elected.
Yeah, but
It's
the
on the-
point is, I'm talking about how we let people know that there are meetings, how often we remind them that there are meetings.
I-
What sort of,
I'm gonna,
I don't know, what do we do? I have no
Brian,
idea.
I'm gonna step in there because I've run a parent group for a long time, and I know Sean has Dartmouth Helping Dartmouth, and I'm not saying that everybody's on social media, but I cannot tell you the amount of times with school-related issues that I have like put out there. You've got to, parents, get involved. You really need to, and and some have. I mean, some have, but I think there's a lot of communication about it. But when it comes down to the end of the day, it's it's a leap because I think there's a lack of familiarity. What is it? I mean, so maybe that's some problem challenges in communication about what it involves. But I mean, I've certainly advertised it a lot, and I think there were signs saying there's a town meeting. I mean, I don't think if you're at all want or have any interest in it that it's overwhelming to become a part of it. I just think it's that making that step that and I think people don't understand. I mean, this is to Sean McDonald's point, how important and influential local politics are in their everyday lives. I think that's kind of lost on people too. I mean, Sean's, I mean, you have a lot of like people who are on their computers and social media, but, understanding how much impact town meeting has, that might be a little lost.
the fact that
I mean,
if you
The
ask-
clerk sends out notices for every town meeting. They send out packages. Town meeting
Right.
members know when the town meetings are. It's not,
if
a
you
Well, right.
ask every citizen in town when the town election is, you'll get a third that'll say it's April. You'll get a third that'll say it's November. And the other third will probably say, I don't know. Because you take a look at the voting over the last 10 years. We've never hit 20%. Never hit 20%. And the last several years, it's been 10, 12%. It's really a pathetic turnoff. When you have a core group of 1,500, 1,600 people who go out and vote, those are the people that run this town, because
Right.
they're the ones that are voting the people in. And a savvy person running can identify those people, they're going to get elected. And it doesn't take too long to figure out where that dynamic is as to who goes out and votes. So, it's something. I've gone with a voters list and knocking door to door. And I've gone to one street, like Palmer Street in the south end of the town, and hit on the middle of the street. That person votes. And then I'm looking at the rest of Palmer Street, nobody else votes. I move over to Ellswick. I'm not wasting my time on, these houses over here, because these people don't go out and vote, so
I'm missing the connection with town meeting.
well, it's the same thing. It's the lack of knowledge of what goes on in this town. Same thing with the voting, and I think a lot of people don't know how the town government works, because I can tell you how many times people say to me, well, you're a selectman, you should be able to do this. No, no, I can't. I can't tell the planning board what to do. I can't tell the Board of Health what to do. I can ask Steve Bello to do something for me, but I'm not going to tell him what to do. That's not my purview. So, I mean, this is where the disconnect in the citizenry and the town government is. It's not knowing what it can and can't do.
And, if anything, and I mentioned this, there's been some benefits to COVID, believe it or not. And I think these remote meetings are one of them. And I think you see that with town meeting, there's been more participation with the remote meetings. So, Anthony and I were talking about this, and I'm hoping the governor continues this after his emergency orders are over. I'm not real optimistic, but I'm hopeful. But even it is allowed for board and committee meetings, though, to have remote meetings. So, that is helpful for public participation, because people, with families that don't have the time to be involved in town government now can, because they can, hop on right after dinner and be home with their kids and still be involved. So I'm hoping people will get more involved once these remote meetings become more of the norm.
I agree
think so, Sean.
completely with that. And I think it's only a matter of time before that's going to happen. And if we could be leaders rather than followers on that, it would be a really good thing.
And I think, like, as we looked at Article 1, one of the things that, again, we all know, like the bulletin board, clearly that's something we need to update. But, in communication, we communicate differently. And that is, there's a lot of noise, but that is, certainly something that, we can hopefully take away from this, is that, communicating via email and, getting our websites up to, to speed and that kind of stuff, I think will help. But, again, John, I think that for people to go out at night when they have little kids, and they've got so much else going on, I do think these last two meetings, I can say for my husband, who, in our family, it was easier. There's no question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting, even if you have little kids, when you start getting, our ages, sorry guys,
No, right there. Right.
you have a spouse at home, so you want to leave, you leave home and you're leaving her behind.
Right.
I mean, I'm lucky I got my 26-year-old kid still living at home. At least he's there, but it's getting to the point now where,
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel kind of crappy that I'm leaving my wife at home.
Right.
I mean, it's probably a good thing for her sometimes, because, especially on a Monday night, I'll be watching football in the fall. She just doesn't, but still, it's something that it weighs on you.
Yeah.
And Sean, like I would say too, the town meeting, and this is maybe like my perspective, but I thought the conversations were more efficient, online, because, and I, I mean, it was quicker, but people got to the point because, I don't know, maybe they were more focused on the, or they weren't trying, it just, they got to the point, and those erroneous, got to the point.
Can I bring it back to the question of the quorum? If we were to reduce the number to say arbitrarily 200, 300, how do we solve the problem of precinct 3, where the number of student voters that are probably here for 4 years, there's no representation. We can't get people from precinct 3 because it is such a transitory population. How do we correct that by lowering the quorum?
Can we divide that precinct up?
Yeah.
We can do
That's
anything. We can combine it.
Divide it up so that half of the school is in one precinct with the neighborhood and another half is in another neighborhood precinct. So
Oh,
we
I
get
mean,
people.
for the people who've been here the longest, which would be Anthony and Steve, you remember Bob Carney getting up,
Absolutely.
Robert Carney, little old precinct 3.
And he was one of 2 or 3 that showed up.
Exactly. He lived on Old Westport Road, right near, right near the mobile station, and that would be him, and Ernie Cadju would also show up to town meeting. And now I think generally that was about it, so, I mean, the question is, when you're dividing up the precincts, you have to be very careful because every precinct has to be kind of even. So if you're going to take, say, 1,000 students from there and put them into one precinct, you got to take another 1,000, put them into something else. So now all of a sudden you're skewing, the precinct, because my precinct 4, is basically the western half of the town, starting from the lake down to Fisher Road and Gidleytown Road. So that's precinct 4. Precinct, and 1 is, of course, is all the top, 2 is on the east, 3 is the little circle of the school, 4 is on the west, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8, and of course 9 is almost completely south. So, I mean, you have to be careful if you're going to subdivide that. I thought, to be honest with you, at the beginning, giving precinct 3 to the entire school was a great idea, because you didn't have to worry about it, and you knew if somebody, I mean, there were a couple of times when somebody did sign up, they were become town meeting members. They never showed up, but at least, 1 or 2 kids, and I guess in the poli-sci class decided that this would be a good thing to do, but they never showed up. So.
That seems interesting though. I mean, Shannon Jenkins is, she's over there. She's poli-sci. Maybe we can, and Doug Roscoe, maybe they can recruit some students to get involved. But I'm with you. Like decreasing the numbers, I think. Yeah.
But they're registered to vote in Dartmouth, but they are only Dartmouth residents by virtue of their school. They have, for the most part, another place where they call home.
Right.
And I don't know how to correct that. I just bring it up because that contributes to the quorum, and those people don't show up. So we're almost guaranteed 36 no-shows or 39 no-shows from that precinct.
I thought it doesn't contribute to the quorum because if they haven't run, we're not counting them as part of the quorum count,
It
right?
just reduces the number, that's all.
Yeah.
It reduces the number of filled positions.
Right.
So instead of filling.
It doesn't really affect it.
Instead of filling out 390, we're filling in 351. Or trying to fill 351.
Yeah. So for our next meeting, I'll look at, what needs to be done to change the number of town meeting reps. We'll see if we can do some research and also what we would have to do to kind of change the precinct or just dissolve 3 into some of the others and see what's involved with that. See more detail.
And the only other option is everybody should know there's the option of going to an open town meeting, and you won't have that issue.
I can tell you that was discussed in the original charter, and just giving you the negatives, it's driven completely by topic. People will show up, they'll vote, and then they'll leave. If there's nothing interesting, for lack of a better word, nobody shows up. And if there's something really heated, everybody shows up and it's unmanageable.
I think so too, Steve.
Factors.
I agree with Steve
Want a good
about that.
example of that? Take a look at Westport.
Westport.
Right,
Yeah, I was
again,
thinking of Westport as you said it. I would be very against that, like for those reasons, it seems.
I would too, because if something's really contentious, you'll have so many people, you can't do anything. And all the other things Steve said make sense. I think it makes sense to reduce the number of town meeting members if there's an efficient way to do it to some more manageable number, then make the job more serious and make maybe a few more requirements on the members to really be available to represent their constituents. But not, I think you'd really, we're a big enough town now that we'd have chaos if we had an open town meeting.
Oh, God.
Sean,
I mean, I would want the boxing glove concessions at the door.
Sean?
And you have to have
been-
it in the
you-
stadium too.
Sean McGinnis,
Yes.
you had produced something, I forget what it was, the pros and cons of, oh, I know what it was. It had to do with
Town
town clerk.
Yep.
Is there any way you could ask somebody to do some research on the pros and cons of reducing town meeting members?
Well, that's a good objective for the consultant. So that's
Well, but we
something-
haven't agreed to the consultant. That's why I was asking.
no, but I mean, that's something that would be kind of their area of expertise, you know, having reviewed other charters just to kind of compare. And that's when I go back to best practices and they would be able to tell us. Yeah, I don't know. That's why I brought it up. I'm like, how do you determine the number of town meeting reps that's appropriate for your?
Well, and then I know for a fact, because I did read some of the, most of the materials that was sent out, that some towns actually have done that, but there's no what happened.
Mhm.
And for that matter, there isn't even why they did it in a lot of the data that came out. And I'm hearing a lot of, you know, everybody has their opinion, but I'd like to, you know, like know what happened with the ones that did and are there pros and cons?
Okay, yeah, I'll do some research on that. and
If you could, or if we do the consultant, they probably have a gigantic database of answering all these questions.
Well, you would hope. I don't know.
Or they make it up as they go along.
That's
Could
what
I
consultants
raise-
do, right?
Yeah.
Could I raise?
Just be
two
careful of
other
the old
issues?
saying about a consultant. They borrow your watch to tell you what time it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do. Watch what you say. I was a consultant for 20 years.
But
Oops,
some of them are better than others, and some of them will actually do good work and help you with stuff.
That's true. And they're
Can I
only
raise
as
a couple
bad,
of other
they're
issues to
only as bad
consider?
as their clients allow them to be, in my experience.
I have a couple of other issues, and I'm not even sure that in each case it's appropriate for the charter. So feel free to tell me I'm off base and it ought to happen a different way. But I have two things that in a big picture nature that have come to my attention since I became a politician, which was only 18 months ago. But one is that a huge number of people in town have no idea of how the town finances work. And even when you get down to the people who you would think really know how they work, they may not. And so I heard, and I don't want to name names or get anybody into trouble, but from a relatively recent member of the finance committee who has serious finance experience in external affairs, you know, big business, big nonprofit. And the person said that this was the first time I've ever been to a budget meeting where the committee only works on the expenses because the revenue is handled by somebody totally different, namely the assessors.
No,
And that's a different kind of
No,
thing
I'm-
in a way.
No,
it's not
that's not
true.
the truth.
Not
Brian,
so?
You know, this
Oh.
is the thing, Steve, this is a good point. So finance committee meetings are public meetings open to the public and nobody.
Right.
And so no one asks questions and then, you know, they're not familiar. And then some of town meeting reps, we go back to this, show up at town meeting and have not reviewed the warrant or didn't know anything about it. And they look at the budget in there and they go,
No, I'm not talking about awareness of I think the committee is aware of things. I'm talking about having power and control over them. So the committee can recommend that we spend less money on this and more money on that as a matter of
No.
distributing resources, right?
No, we can't. All we can do is comment on the budget that's put forth by the town administrator. The budget is owned by the select board. It's their budget. All we can do is comment on the appropriations that they have made and agree.
Okay,
with
so,
the town
okay,
administration.
well, that's good for me to know. So who's responsible for telling the assessors what to do?
The assessors, I've been on this thing since February. I haven't heard them mentioned.
well, there's a board of assessors, but it depends what you want
Elected.
them to do. I mean, the revenues are based on the tax rate.
Right?
And, you know, and that tax rate can increase 2.5% every year. Now we have other revenues that are related to say excise tax, there's state aid. I mean, that's all in the budget. It's listed. Revenues are listed.
Right. And I am very well familiar with back to 1980 and Barbara Anderson when Massachusetts went through Prop 2.5 and in fact, a great number of Dartmouth's problems as well as most of the other 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts are directly related to that sea change. And people have different opinions about whether that was a good idea or a bad idea. I'm not sure that many of our citizens, particularly the ones who weren't around to pay attention in 1980 when that all happened, a lot of them may not know that reality. But I do think that there's a question of exactly how the finances are managed. And if you decide, for example, that you need more tax revenue for this or that reason, and should we or should we not have an override, given that the state law is what it is, and Dartmouth alone isn't going to change that, or should we be more careful to force budget cutting? I don't think it's clear to people as to who has the clout to do that and which committee is responsible. And similarly, I think most people, including me, and I mean, I now know a little bit more, but people don't have any idea whether the planning board, some of us naively thought that the planning board actually does planning, but for the most part, it does reviews of other people's plans. And then it does a little bit of planning. And then the zoning board of appeals has actually a bigger impact on many of the actual proposals that come forth than the planning board can have. And I don't know if the charter is capable of sorting that stuff out and clearing it up and maybe getting rid of some self-interested biases
as
here and there
far-
or not, but I'd be
as
in
far-
favor of that if it is.
Well, I
As
can tell
far
you,
as the, oh, sorry, can I just say something?
ahead,
As far
Ryan.
as the finance committee, it's spelt out exactly in the charter. I don't
Yeah.
know about the rest of it.
Okay,
that's why I always say, tell people to read the charter because there's a lot of information in there.
right.
Particularly as it relates to finances and, you know, that tells you what the planning board does and zoning board, not to the detail that you may like, but finance wise, it's pretty clear and explicit what, you know, the finance committee does, the town administrator does, the finance director and the select board do. So
Right, no, and I don't disagree that what the current charter says is pretty clear. What I'm raising for question, since you brought up the question of should we consider some big issue stuff, is the current charter correct on all of those things, or could we make it, the town government more efficient if we change some of it? And I'll give you a great example. Right now, it surprised me to learn when I joined that every 10 years we do a master plan. Periodically, we do some kind of other interim plan, which isn't quite a master plan, like the harbor development plan or some other plan. But all the good ideas that many citizens go to workshops for and make that all happen, none of those ideas become the force of law or actually a regulation until all the plan gathers dust on the shelf until one at a time, every single one of those ideas either does or doesn't get brought forward to town meeting and get voted on. And that's
But
very
that's the planning
democratic. So
board.
in that sense, it's good, but it's also very inefficient.
But that's the planning board's job, is to make propose changes to the zoning. That's what
Exactly.
you guys are
Anthony,
supposed to be
You're
doing.
100% right, but when you measure the time that the planning board spends doing stuff, I bet you it's less than 10%. It might be 5% of the hours that we sit in meetings when we actually do planning. We're all
It wasn't
all the
always that
time
way.
reviewing other people's plans.
But it hasn't always been that way.
No.
Some
Well-
planning boards are a lot more active in the rezoning of the town than others.
I understand that, and I'll do my part to try to help change that. But that's not necessarily for the charter committee to worry about. But the whole question of maybe whether the planning review people might be a different group than the planning people. I don't know, but that's the question I'm raising.
I don't understand your question.
Well, in order to make intelligent ideas about future changes to zoning for this, that, or the other reason, let's say you want to do something that's going to help with climate change or with sea level rise or with suburban sprawl or whatever it is, in order to make proposed changes to the rules to fix that are legal in the state orbit, it takes some real time and hard effort to do that work. And if you have a 3-hour meeting every 2 weeks, and 2 hours and 55 minutes of it is filled up with reviewing plan A, B, C, D from some developer doing whatever project, whether it's industrial or business or residential subdivision, you end up spending no time at all doing planning. And then when it comes time to do the 10-year master plan, you hire a consultant, in this case, Serped, and you delegate it to them, and half the planning board members don't even show up to the workshops. And certainly you don't see very many people. The actual people who appear before the planning board are totally different than the people who show up to the workshops. So I just wonder how much sense that all makes, or whether there might be another way. And if there was a quote, another way, I think it would be, as Steve taught us in the first meeting, taught me anyway, in the first meeting of this charter commission, the charter tells the town how things are supposed to be organized among the people who run it. And then the people who run it make the regulations. I
Right,
thought that
but
was
to
a very
some
informative
extent-
thing, but
To some extent, but a lot of it's controlled by statute. I mean, planning board has statutory authorities that are designated to it.
right, no, and I get that. And that part we can't necessarily change except through a different process. And I'm no lawyer, and so I have to defer to you and Brian and others on that point. Yes, I get
It seems to me a lot of the stuff that you're mentioning and is really depending on how the various committee, not your committee particularly, but how it's organized and how it receives information and what it decides to spend its time on.
right. Yeah, though that's,
So
you're
If you're
absolutely
bogged,
right.
I'm not saying you are, but I mean, but if you're bogged down by minutia in a particular committee, then it's up to the committee people to get rid of the minutia.
Right.
And then
I
concentrate on what's
completely agree.
important.
But then when you try to do that, people call up and say, wait a minute, you're not allowed to put off a developer for more than X amount of days before you answer his or her questions. And that gets into a whole,
Well, wouldn't that be,
Who
it's
gets
in the
favored?
bylaws,
That's general law.
Anthony?
I think you
No,
guys
that's
back
not
with
general
some of
law.
the detail here. I think, but Steve, to your point, like you're not happy with the way the planning board's moving quick enough, right? Well, this is an issue with decentralized government. Everyone's elected. So it
Yeah.
takes a long time to change. So this is something the committee could look at. It's like, well, maybe the planning board should be appointed by the select board, and the select board determines, hey, this group we've appointed, they're not moving quick enough. So we're gonna start
You-
changing them and appointing people that we think can
Okay.
more
Can
quickly.
you try to adjust my video? It's not working.
but there's also a
Whatever.
counter argument to that in that
Right. So
if
this is
if
what
the
this
select
committee's
board
gonna
wants to
figure out.
favor one type of activity versus another and they do the appointing, then there's no way to run for office to
So,
favor the other kind
so
of activity.
here again, I think we need to have a consultant come when we have
Right.
questions like this. I
John?
don't say you're gonna resolve it any other way.
Right, I think you might be
Excuse
right.
me, guys, people, I have to leave because I have a board meeting at 7 o'clock. So, with this recording, I'll watch the rest of it.
Well, we may have to end because.
Because there's no
you
quorum.
leave-
We don't have
we
our chairs.
quorum, And I'm not sure who FL is, so I think they might be a member of the public, so we might have to end early.
Yeah, it's just, you
And
still.
I'm
can-
not a member. I'm not a member.
Right,
you
Anthony's
still
not a
can
member.
discuss, you still can
So we
discuss,
don't have a
things.
quorum?
You just can't vote anything.
We lack, yeah.
That's,
We'd have a quorum.
unfortunate, this happened. I
Is
apologize.
this a town meeting we're at, or what?
What's
No,
that?
it's-
I thought it was just a
Oh,
town
it's a
meeting.
one-
We need to reduce
Where
the
I-
number of members on the committee.
It's where I actually earn
Ah,
my
it's like
money.
catch 22. The whole place is gonna go crazy.
I know, I gotta go to a meeting where I actually earn money, so,
Yeah.
sorry, guys.
All right, Sean, thanks.
Thanks,
Sean,
Sean.
thanks, Sean.
Sorry, that was fun.
All right, so, and then we should say that's Steve, a broader discussion. So, but basically, I guess think about that so much, not in the detail, but okay, well, yeah, the planning board doesn't move quick enough. Should this be elected or appointed, or what are the pros and cons to that?
Well, I'm not sure we would need to do anything quite that drastic, but you could, for example, have a planning board that had a subcommittee to do the reviews of every individual
that's-
project, and then the planning board itself could do more planning.
Right, but that's kind of outside of this, but.
Yeah.
and that-
Can we go back to breaking this task that we're faced with into two topics? One of them being administrative or clerical changes to the existing charter, and the second part being substantive changes to structure. And
Yeah.
then we can decide whether in my mind, if we tackle the administrative clerical clear up, it familiarizes ourselves with the existing charter, and we know where to go back and plug in things that are suggested,
Right.
like the substantive
I-
administrative.
I agree with you 100%.
And I personally think that we are better suited to do most of the substantive changes ourselves without going through a consultant. I think the clerical things can be done with a proofreader, if that's what the word I want is, that we don't need, a professional consultant to do that. But if we try this on our own and then, we didn't hire the original charter, did not hire the consultant until we were putting it all together after we had met with our department heads individually. So just my thought.
The only question I think that's great in an ideal world, but the only question I have with it is, I think, and we've seen a lot of it tonight, everybody has their opinion, but other towns have actually done some of the things that we're talking about with, I'm sure, I have no idea, but I mean, with good and bad consequences. So in my opinion, would be rather than trying to live through it again, or it would be better at least to listen to people who have knowledge of what other towns have done and then make a decision.
On the substantive, that's possible. I think we could look at that way, but I don't think we need a consultant to tell us that he, she, or they should be changed to whatever the
Oh, no.
modern pronoun.
Yeah.
I
No,
agree.
and not only that, we don't even need a committee as big as ourselves to do that. We can defer to town council and 2 or 3 other people who have a really good education in writing and proofreading and have at least get a clean draft, and all the stuff where we have pronoun problems or reference confusions, all that stuff that's purely language could be cleared up in round 1, and then we could read the red line version of that and decide if it actually took us in any other different direction. But even the committee that's on the email list that you send out to call people to these meetings is way too big to proofread a document for pronouns.
No, I think the red line document that we were sent from town council does exactly that. And we take those maybe chapter by chapter and vote, and then we move on to the substantive changes.
Right, so we mostly vote yes and just get it done because town council's probably already done that work.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. So what Steve says makes sense to me in that regard.
Mhm.
Okay, so Anthony, you gonna do Article 2 for the next meeting?
Yeah, I think that's it. But I mean, I have a question though, too, just on Article 1. I don't want to bring it up now, but I mean, I had a couple of questions, but I don't have it handy for me. I didn't know what we were going to do. They weren't big deals. It was just like questions. Well, I can't even remember. But I think we should at least have, if we're going to do this, when we go through the red line version and we do it article by article, I think that, isn't that what they call like 1 is Article 1 of the, yeah. That we at least have, you know, does anybody have any questions on Article 1 in terms of the changes that have been made or suggested?
So maybe for the next meeting, we can go through, since when everybody's back is Anthony, I don't know, put pressure on Anthony, if you want to do Article 2 as well with
Sure.
your, and then
Yeah, I think that'd be great. That's a great
and then
way of doing it.
he'll put them out ahead of time, and then we can review and the committee can vote on the grammatical changes to Articles 1 and 2, and that.
And you might want to say, whoever's putting these out, that in the interest of saving time and moving the substantive issues, if that's the right word, that it's requested that people read in fair detail these redlined articles so that we can move through them rather quickly and get to substantive. In other words, before you come, read it.
Okay.
So do we feel like
Sophia,
we've
you got your
squared
camera
away?
to work.
So just for my education, let's say we do read it and the pronouns all make sense. There's no grammatical or verb tense issue. So it all makes sense language wise. And we come in and vote that that's all agreeable. That doesn't necessarily commit us to saying that every bit of substance that's in that particular article is now settled. We can still go back and alter substance if we want to, right?
But
That's-
I
that's
did
what-
I did alter some substance based on
Yeah,
current
that's the,
practice
yeah.
and based on some legal issues that I saw as
That's-
well.
So
that's-
you could call attention to those in those meetings so we would know when you had actually changed.
Yeah, well, I
the-
think I did. I made comments.
You
I put
did.
Right.
comments in.
Right,
You
okay.
did. But that's my point. I think I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to ask the questions. And
Yeah,
I think
right.
what Steve was suggesting is go through it, and then as we go through it and agree the changes that are grammatical or whatever, and then have a discussion about what's in that particular article that may carry over into a second meeting before we get to the
Right.
point where we feel like we know what we're doing and we want to, whatever, I don't know, vote on whatever the substantive changes might be.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and your votes, when the board votes during this process, it's not set in stone vote. You can just agree,
Yeah.
Come-
move on to the next section.
Can you come back again at the end and review the whole thing?
You can
Yeah,
review it,
absolutely.
and, yeah, you vote on the whole thing, or you vote after the fact on each section, however you want to do it. So you can just agree like, okay, this section's done. We're gonna move on to section 2 or 3 next week, and then.
Or we can say, move on, we agree to most of the sections, but we're gonna carry over section 2.3 till next week for a deeper discussion.
Right.
Yeah,
and we
I
can
I
do
will
that.
try to highlight also some issues that I see that are potential for discussion. For instance,
that's good.
who reports to whom and
Mhm.
elected versus appointed, things like that. I'll point those out as potential options for the board, for the committee to discuss.
I'll send
Yeah.
you mine, Anthony. I did that too.
Oh, you
So-
did? Good, okay.
So I'll send you what I have. You can combine them.
Are we going to revisit Article 1 since we don't have, Heidi or Brock here next week?
Yeah,
Or
well-
next time?
Anthony's gonna do Article 2, and then we'll review both of them. And
But we're reviewing them for grammar and whatever the right other terms might be. And then also discuss as we go along in those particular articles, if we have any issues about how the charter works in the particular areas that are in those articles.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Anything else? All right, so we'll, someone is gonna make a motion to adjourn.
I make that
motion.
motion.
I'll second.
In a second.
Third. Fourth.
All those in favor?
I-
Aye.
I see everyone, hand raised. Okay, all right, so we'll
All right.
meet up again on the 18th, and Anthony
Okay.
has homework, which is great.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
Thank you.
guys.
Oh, wait, sorry, the consultant, what do we, they got to show up at the next meeting,
I'm
right?
gonna ask
Somebody
him to
can-
come to the next meeting, and it's
That'd be
worth just
good.
hearing him out. If we use him,
Right.
decide to move forward, but maybe he'll give us some
That
insight.
sounds like a good idea.
I think
And
so.
Okay.
My thanks to all of you for educating me. I'm trying to learn fast, but thank you.
Yeah.
David, I'll be happy to talk to you about some of the concerns you've raised tonight, if you want to give me a call sometime this week or next week.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.